Have you ever wondered why two people can grow up in the same world, work the same hours, earn the same income, yet end up living completely different financial lives? Why some escape the rat race while others stay trapped in it forever? What if the difference isn't luck, but mindset, a mindset you were never taught in school? In today's video, we're diving into the ideas that the rich understand, the poor misunderstand, and the middle class never question. And once you hear this, you'll never look at money the same way again. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The rich don't work for money. Have you ever noticed how some people work their whole lives, chasing paychecks, promotions, and job security, yet never seem to break free from financial stress? Meanwhile, others, sometimes with less education, seem to attract wealth effortlessly. What's their secret? In this video, we'll uncover one of the most eye-opening lessons from Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Chapter 1. The rich don't work for money. By the end, you'll see why most people spend their lives working for money, and how the rich make money work for them. Robert Kiyosaki grew up with two father figures who shaped his entire perspective on money. His real father, whom he calls his poor dad, was a well-educated man, a school teacher who believed deeply in hard work, good grades, and a stable job. Then there was his rich dad, the father of his best friend Mike, who had little formal education but was a successful businessman. Both men were intelligent, both cared for Robert, yet their ideas about money couldn't be more different. Poor Dad would say, "Go to school, get a good job, and work hard for your money." Rich Dad, on the other hand, would say, "Learn how money works and make it work for you." This difference in mindset became the foundation for everything Robert would later teach. At just 9 years old, Robert and his friend Mike asked Rich Dad how they could make money. Instead of giving them a lecture, Rich Dad gave them a job in one of his stores, paying only 10 cents an hour. At first, they were excited, but soon they felt cheated. They were working hard, yet earning almost nothing. After a few weeks, they went to Rich Dad to complain and demand a raise. That's when the real lesson began. Rich Dad looked at them and said something powerful. Most people blame their boss for their problems. They think if they earn more money, their life will improve. But if you don't learn how money works, you'll spend your whole life working for it. He explained that money alone doesn't solve financial struggles, knowledge does. Then he told them something that stuck with Robert forever. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich make money work for them. You see, Rich Dad wasn't trying to teach them how to earn more. He was teaching them how to think differently. He wanted them to see how fear and greed control most people's lives. Fear of not having enough pushes people to work harder, to cling to job security, to chase a paycheck. Then when they finally get paid, greed takes over. They want more, they spend more, they buy things to feel good, and before long, they're trapped again. This emotional cycle, fear and desire, is what Rich Dad called the rat race. It's where people spend their entire lives working for money, paying bills, buying liabilities, and wondering why they never get ahead. The secret, Rich Dad said, is to break free from that cycle by understanding how money works. He taught Robert that the rich don't get rich because of their income. They get rich because they acquire assets, things that put money in their pocket, like investments, businesses, or real estate. Meanwhile, the poor and middle class accumulate liabilities, things that take money out of their pocket, like cars, gadgets, or debt. The rich focus on building and owning assets. Everyone else focuses on earning and spending. Rich Dad's message was simple but life-changing. Stop working for money and start working to learn. Don't chase a bigger paycheck, chase better knowledge. The moment you understand how money flows, you can make it flow toward you, not away from you. So what can we learn from this first chapter? Financial freedom isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter. The rich see money as a tool, not a goal. They invest in learning, in building assets, in taking control of their time and choices. The poor and middle class trade time for money. The rich trade ideas for money. Robert realized that education teaches us to work for others, But financial education teaches us to make money work for us. That's the mindset that separates financial struggle from financial independence. So let me ask you this. Are you working for money, or is your money working for you? Because the moment you start thinking like the rich, like Robert's rich dad, that's the moment your financial journey truly begins. Chapter 2. Why teach financial literacy? Have you ever noticed that schools teach us everything about math, science, and history, but almost nothing about money? We learn how to get a job, how to earn a salary, how to spend it, but no one teaches us how to make money grow. Isn't that strange? We spend years in classrooms, yet most adults end up struggling with credit cards, loans, and bills. So here's the real question. If education is supposed to prepare us for life, why aren't we financially prepared? That's exactly what Chapter 2 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad explores. Why teach financial literacy? Robert Kiyosaki says that the biggest reason people struggle financially is not because they're lazy or uneducated. It's because they were never taught how money actually works. The world is full of hardworking people who know how to earn money, but very few who know how to keep it. Rich Dad explained to Robert that understanding the difference between assets and liabilities is the foundation of financial literacy. It sounds simple, right? But here's the shocker: most people don't really know the difference. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. It's that simple, and yet it's the most misunderstood concept in personal finance. Rich Dad said, the rich focus on buying assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities, but they think they're assets. Think about it: your car, your home, your new phone, your expensive furniture. Most of these are liabilities. They cost money every month, but we're taught to believe that owning them means we're successful. That's the trap. Rich Dad taught that true wealth isn't about how much money you make. It's about how much you keep and how hard that money works for you. The rich don't measure success by salary. They measure it by cash flow. The goal is to have assets like investments, real estate, or businesses that generate income, even when you're not working. Meanwhile, most people spend their lives in a financial pattern that looks like this. They get paid rut-ura, they spend it on bills and luxuries rut-ura, and then wait for the next paycheck. That's the rat race, and education never warned us about it. Robert realized that his poor dad, despite being highly educated, was financially struggling because he focused on earning more, not on managing what he earned. His rich dad, who barely finished high school, was building wealth because he focused on owning assets. The difference wasn't intelligence, it was financial literacy. Rich Dad said, if you want to be rich, you have to know the difference between an asset and a liability and buy assets. That's the golden rule. Money flows to those who understand how to control it. This chapter isn't just about money, it's about awareness. It's about realizing that working harder isn't the solution, working smarter is. The rich don't play the money game harder, they play it smarter, using knowledge as their greatest tool. So ask yourself this: are you spending your life buying things that take money out of your pocket, or things that put money in it? Because once you understand that difference, everything changes. That's why Rich Dad insisted on teaching financial literacy. Because without it, no matter how much you earn, you'll always struggle to build wealth. But with it, even a small income can grow into financial freedom. And that's the lesson of Chapter 2. Don't just earn money, learn money. Chapter 3. Mind your own business. Have you ever felt like you're working day and night, putting all your time and energy into a job, but somehow you're not really getting ahead? You get a raise, you get promoted, but your financial situation never truly changes. That's not by accident, it's by design. And in Chapter 3 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki reveals exactly why that happens and how to break free from it. This chapter is called Mind Your Own Business. And no, it's not about being rude or telling people to back off. It's about learning how to take control of your financial life. It's about understanding the difference between your job and your business. Most people spend their entire lives working for someone else's dream. They wake up every morning to build another person's business, another person's brand, another person's wealth. That's what Robert's poor dad did. He was an employee, a hardworking, loyal, intelligent man who gave everything to his job. But despite all that effort, he still struggled financially. Rich Dad, on the other hand, taught Robert something completely different. He said, "The moment you decide to work for yourself, even while you're employed, that's when you start becoming wealthy." At first, Robert didn't understand. "But Rich Dad," he asked, "how can I work for myself if I still have a job?" Rich Dad smiled and said, "Your job is what puts food on the table, but your business, your true business, is what will make you rich." And that's the essence of this chapter. Most people confuse their profession with their business. A doctor thinks his business is his medical practice. A lawyer thinks her business is her firm. A teacher thinks her business is her classroom. But those are professions, not businesses. Rich Dad explained that your real business is your asset column, the part of your life where your money works for you. He told Robert, "No matter what job you do, always focus on building your assets. That's your true business." And this is where so many people get it wrong. They think success means climbing the corporate ladder, but Rich Dad said, "Don't climb the ladder, own the ladder." He encouraged Robert to use his paycheck not for luxuries or status symbols, but to buy or build investments that generate income whether he worked or not. This could be anything from real estate, stocks, royalties, or a small side business. Anything that adds money to your pocket without needing your constant presence. Rich Dad believed that financial independence comes when your asset column grows enough to cover your expenses, when you no longer rely on your paycheck. That's when you're free. But here's the trap most people fall into. As their income rises, so does their spending. They buy bigger houses, fancier cars, more gadgets, things that look impressive but drain their pockets. They call them investments, but in reality, they're liabilities. Robert saw this happen over and over again. People earning six-figure salaries but still living paycheck to paycheck. Why? Because they were minding someone else's business, their employer, while ignoring their own. Rich Dad taught him that even if you have a job, you must act like a business owner in your own life. He said, "You can be employed, but never forget your true job is to mind your own business." That means learning about money, managing your finances, tracking your assets, and constantly asking, "Is this putting money into my pocket or taking it out?" Rich Dad also warned about what he called the illusion of security. People stay in jobs they hate because they think a steady paycheck makes them safe. But true security doesn't come from your employer. It comes from your ability to generate income on your own terms. He said, people think a job protects them, but the moment the company struggles, they're the first to go. So build something that's yours. Build your own business, even if it starts small. Robert started noticing how the rich spent their time differently. The poor and middle class spent their time earning money. The rich spent their time building and acquiring assets. The poor focused on income statements, how much they earned each month. The rich focused on balance sheets, how much they owned and how much they owed. Rich Dad would often say, "It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep and how hard that money works for you." That's why this chapter is so powerful. It challenges the idea that success means having a high-paying job. Instead, it says that true success means owning income-generating assets that create financial freedom. Robert also noticed something else. The rich often appear to have more time. Why? Because their money works for them. They've built systems and investments that generate income even when they're asleep. The poor and middle class, on the other hand, are trapped trading their time for money. Rich Dad's advice was clear. Don't wait for the perfect moment to start building your business. Start now. Start small. Even a small investment or side hustle is a seed that can grow into financial freedom. And this doesn't mean quitting your job tomorrow. It means using your job as a stepping stone to fund your future. Use your salary wisely, not to inflate your lifestyle, but to buy your freedom. Rich Dad taught Robert to always pay himself first, to take a portion of every dollar he earned and invest it into something that would generate future income. He said, "You must learn to keep your money working, even when you're not." In the end, this chapter delivers one of the most important financial truths you'll ever hear. The rich focus on building assets. Everyone else focuses on earning income. So mind your own business. Build your asset column. Stop trading your time for money and start creating streams of income that flow toward you. Because when your assets generate enough income to cover your expenses, that's not just financial success, that's financial freedom. And once you reach that point, you'll finally understand what Rich Dad meant when he said, "Don't work for money. Let money work for you." Chapter 4. The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why the rich keep getting richer, even when taxes go up? Why is it that every time new tax laws are introduced to target the wealthy, somehow the rich end up finding ways to pay less, while the middle class ends up paying more? That's not luck, it's knowledge. And in Chapter 4 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki reveals the secret behind this, understanding the history of taxes and the power of corporations. Now, this chapter might sound like it's about boring accounting or legal loopholes, but trust me, this is where the game of money really gets interesting. Because once you understand how the rich use the system legally, you'll never see money the same way again. Rich Dad told Robert, "The difference between the rich and everyone else isn't just how much they make. It's how they think about money and how they use the rules." He explained that the tax system wasn't originally created for the poor or middle class. In fact, when income tax was first introduced, it was meant to target the rich to make them pay their fair share. But here's the twist. Over time, that changed. The rich learned how to play the game. They learned how to use corporations and legal structures to protect their money and reduce their tax burdens. Meanwhile, the middle class, believing taxes were helping society, ended up paying more and more, often without realizing it. Rich Dad would smile and say, "The poor and middle class work for money. The rich have money and systems working for them." Let's break that down. When an employee earns money, the government takes taxes first before the person even sees their paycheck. That's why your salary comes after tax. You work, you get paid, and before you can even spend a dollar, the government gets its share. But the rich, they operate differently. The rich earn money through corporations or business entities, and that changes everything. Here, how the system works for most people. 1. You earn. 2. You're taxed. 3. You spend what's left. But for the rich, it's reversed. 1. They earn. 2. They spend. 3. They're taxed on what's left. See the difference? That's not cheating, that's understanding how the rules of money work. Rich Dad used to tell Robert, "The tax code is a series of incentives for people who do what the government wants done." What does that mean? It means the government rewards behavior that benefits the economy, creating jobs, building housing, investing in energy, starting businesses. So instead of punishing the rich, the system actually rewards them, because they do what the economy needs to grow. For example, when a business owner reinvests profits into growing their company, hiring employees, or buying equipment, those expenses are often tax deductible. They reduce the amount of income that gets taxed. But an employee can't deduct much. They get taxed first, and then they pay their bills. That's why Rich Dad always said, "Don't be afraid to own a business, be afraid to stay ignorant." He taught Robert that a corporation isn't some giant building or a faceless company. It's simply a legal entity that provides protection and advantages to those who understand it. It can own property, make money, pay expenses, and be taxed differently than an individual. The rich use corporations not only to reduce taxes, but also to protect their assets. If someone sues a corporation, it's the business that's at risk, not the owner's personal wealth. The corporation acts like a shield. Rich Dad would often say, employees earn, get taxed, and spend what's left. Business owners earn, spend, and then get taxed. That single shift in how you structure your money changes everything. Robert realized that his poor dad, though highly educated, never understood this game. He always said, "I'm not interested in money. I just want a secure job." But Rich Dad saw money as a tool, and he made sure to learn every rule about how that tool works. He taught Robert that financial intelligence isn't just about making money, it's about keeping it, protecting it, and multiplying it. Taxes and corporations are tools in that process. In this chapter, Robert also learned about the danger of relying on the government for fairness. He saw that tax systems and economic rules often evolve to favor those who adapt fastest, not those who complain the loudest. The rich spend time learning the rules of the game. The poor spend time working harder in the game. Rich Dad compared it to a sport. He said, "If you don't know the rules, you'll always lose, even if you're the hardest working player on the field." That hit Robert deeply. He realized his poor dad was playing by old rules in a game that had already changed. So what does this mean for us? It means if you want financial freedom, you can't just work for money. You must learn how money moves. You must learn how to use the system legally and intelligently. You must understand how to control your income, your expenses, and your taxes like a business does. Rich Dad wasn't telling Robert to become a tax expert or a lawyer. He was telling him to think like an entrepreneur, to learn how money works on a bigger scale, to stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like an owner. Because here's the truth, the government doesn't teach you this in school. They teach you how to earn a paycheck, not how to protect it. They teach you how to fill out tax forms, not how to use the tax system to your advantage. And that's why financial education is so powerful. It's not about avoiding taxes. It's about being smart enough to play the game fairly and legally, like the rich do. So the lesson from Chapter 4 is this. The rich use corporations and the tax system to their advantage, not because they're greedy, but because they're financially intelligent. They understand that every dollar saved in taxes is a dollar that can be reinvested into building assets, creating jobs, and growing wealth. Rich Dad always said, "Don't fight the system, learn how to use it." And that's the real power of this chapter. It's about shifting from frustration to education. Because once you understand how money really works, you stop being a victim of the system and start being the one who controls it. So ask yourself this. Are you playing the money game blindfolded, or are you learning the rules like the rich do? Because once you see the game for what it really is, you'll never play it the same way again. Chapter 5. The Rich Invent Money. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever met someone who always seems to find opportunities everywhere? It's like no matter what's happening in the economy, inflation, recession, or uncertainty, they somehow manage to turn challenges into cash flow. And then there are others who look at the same world, the same situation, but only see problems, risks, and limitations. So what separates those two kinds of people? In Chapter 5 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, titled The Rich Invent Money, Robert Kiyosaki explains that the difference isn't luck, it's financial intelligence. Rich Dad told Robert something powerful. Money isn't real, it's an idea. The richer you get, the more you realize that money is created by thought. When Robert first heard that, it sounded crazy. How could money be an idea? But as he grew older, he understood that rich people don't sit around waiting for opportunities, they *create them. They invent money. This doesn't mean printing fake cash or doing something illegal. It means using knowledge, creativity, and courage to see what others can't. Rich Dad said, "The rich see opportunities with their minds, not their eyes." He believed that everyone has money-making opportunities in front of them, but only those who are financially educated can recognize and act on them. The poor and middle class often say, "I can't afford that." The rich ask, "How can I afford it?" That one small change in thinking opens the door to possibility. In this chapter, Robert learns that the real difference between the rich and everyone else isn't how much money they start with, it's how they think. Poor Dad always told him to be safe, to avoid risk, to focus on job security. But Rich Dad told him, the biggest risk is not learning how to take risks. He explained that opportunities don't vanish, they pass by those who aren't prepared, and preparation comes from financial education. You see, money doesn't flow to those who work the hardest, it flows to those who think the smartest. The rich don't need to wait for the perfect job or perfect time. They invent ways to make money by solving problems, creating value, and seeing patterns before others do. Robert realized that wealth is never about luck, it's about knowledge. When you have financial intelligence, you can turn almost any situation into an advantage. For example, during market crashes, most people panic and sell their investments in fear. But the rich see opportunity, they buy assets at a discount. When everyone else retreats, the rich advance because they understand the game. Rich Dad used to say, "There's more money to be made when people are scared than when they are confident, if you know what you're doing." That's the key, if you know what you're doing. Financial literacy gives you the ability to spot opportunity where others only see danger. It gives you the tools to take calculated risks instead of emotional ones. Rich Dad believed that the world is filled with money. The problem is not the lack of money, it's the lack of vision. Most people don't see opportunities because they're too focused on security. They want a guaranteed paycheck, a predictable future. But true wealth comes from embracing uncertainty and mastering it. He told Robert, "The moment you start thinking creatively about money, you stop being an employee and start being an entrepreneur." This doesn't mean everyone should quit their job tomorrow. It means you must learn to develop your financial IQ. Rich Dad said financial intelligence is made up of 4 key skills. 1. Accounting, knowing how to read numbers and understand where money flows. 2. Investing, learning how to make money grow and multiply. 3. Understanding markets, seeing how supply, demand, and trends affect value. 4. Law, knowing how to use tax advantages and protection legally. Once you master these, you begin to see money everywhere. Robert realized that money flows to those who are confident and educated, not to those who are fearful and unprepared. Poor Dad used to say, "I can't afford that." Rich Dad taught him to ask, "How can I make it happen?" That one question activates your creativity, your problem solving, and your entrepreneurial spirit. This is why the rich are always growing, because they're constantly learning. They make mistakes, yes, but they learn from those mistakes, while the poor avoid mistakes altogether and miss their chances to grow. Rich Dad said, "The more you seek security, the less freedom you have. The more you seek freedom, the more secure you'll become because you'll control your own money." It's a paradox, but it's true. In this chapter, Robert also learned that opportunities don't just come from having money, they come from having knowledge. You could give someone $1 million, but if they don't have financial intelligence, they'll lose it. That's why lottery winners often go broke. They know how to make money for a moment, but not how to manage or multiply it. The rich, on the other hand, could lose everything and rebuild it, because they understand how money really works. Rich Dad told Robert, "The rich invent money because they understand that money is created through ideas, deals, and timing. The poor think money is something they earn by working for it." That's the key difference. The rich use money as a tool. The poor treat money as the goal. Robert finally understood that every person has the ability to invent money by using creativity, courage, and knowledge. The problem is that most people never take the time to build those qualities. They wait for permission. They wait for luck, but the rich create their own chances. So the message from this chapter is simple but life-changing. Don't wait for money, invent it. Start learning, start thinking, and start looking at the world differently. Every problem is an opportunity in disguise. Every skill you build becomes a seed for future wealth. Because at the end of the day, Rich Dad was right, money isn't the real asset. Your mind is. And the more you develop it, the more wealth it will create for you. So ask yourself this: are you waiting for opportunity, or are you training your mind to invent it? Because once you realize that money is created by ideas, not labor, that's when you stop chasing money and start creating it. And that's when you'll finally understand what it means to think like the rich. Chapter 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. Have you ever felt stuck in your job, like you're working hard, earning just enough to stay comfortable but not really growing? You do everything right, follow every rule, and still, something feels off. It's as if you're busy all the time but not actually moving forward. If that sounds familiar, then this chapter of Rich Dad, Poor Dad will hit home. Because Chapter 6, Work to Learn, Don't Work for Money, is all about escaping that trap. Rich Dad told Robert, the poor and middle class work for money, the rich work to learn. At first, Robert didn't fully understand what that meant. Wasn't the whole point of work to earn money? That's what his poor dad always said. Study hard, get a good job, earn a steady paycheck. But Rich Dad had a completely different perspective. He said, a job is only temporary, but the skills you learn will feed you for a lifetime. He believed that too many people focus on income instead of education. They chase promotions, titles, and pay raises, but never focus on developing new skills that actually make them more valuable in the marketplace. And that's why they stay stuck, trading their time for money, instead of using their time to build mastery. Rich Dad told Robert, the moment you stop learning, you stop growing. And when you stop growing, your opportunities shrink. He explained that money naturally flows to those who are capable of solving bigger problems. The more skills you develop, whether it's communication, sales, leadership, marketing, investing, or managing people, the more valuable you become. He said, don't look for high pay, look for high learning. That was one of Rich Dad's golden rules. He believed that the real paycheck of any job is not the money, it's the education. Robert learned this firsthand. Early in his career, after serving in the Marines, he took jobs that paid very little, but each one taught him something new. He worked in sales for Xerox, not because he loved selling, but because Rich Dad told him, if you can't sell, you can't survive. At first, Robert was terrified. He didn't want to talk to strangers or face rejection. But Rich Dad explained that learning to sell wasn't about pushing products. It was about building confidence, communication, and persuasion. It was about understanding people. And those skills, Rich Dad said, would pay him far more in the long run than a paycheck ever could. Robert soon realized that most people are controlled by fear, fear of losing money, fear of rejection, fear of failure. So they cling to safety. They find one skill, one job, and stay there for decades, comfortable but limited. Rich Dad called this the specialist trap. He said, the world is full of smart, capable people who are one skill away from great wealth. That line changed Robert's life, one skill away. It made him realize that if he wanted to be rich, he couldn't just be good at one thing. He needed to become well-rounded, to learn how all parts of money and business work together. Rich Dad taught that great entrepreneurs and investors are generalists, not specialists. They understand a little bit about a lot: sales, marketing, finance, leadership, communication, management, and investing. They know how to make money flow from one area to another because they see the big picture. Poor Dad, on the other hand, always told Robert to find one stable job and stick to it. He thought security came from specialization, but Rich Dad believed that security comes from adaptability, the ability to create value in many ways. Rich Dad often said, "The most powerful asset you can have is your mind. Train it well and it will produce wealth endlessly." He warned Robert about the danger of emotional reactions, especially fear and greed, because they trap people into working harder for money instead of smarter for freedom. He'd say, people get a little raise and think they're winning, but they're just tightening the golden handcuffs. They become so dependent on their paycheck that they forget how to grow. Robert noticed this pattern everywhere. People switch jobs for slightly higher pay but never develop new skills. Years pass and they realize their income barely changed, but their growth stopped entirely. Rich Dad encouraged him to do the opposite, to take jobs and opportunities that scared him, to put himself in uncomfortable situations where he had no choice but to learn. He told him, "Don't work to make a living, work to make yourself stronger." He used an example from his own life. When Rich Dad was building his businesses, he didn't know accounting, sales, or law, but he learned them, not by reading textbooks, but by doing. By failing, observing, asking questions, and surrounding himself with people smarter than him. He said, "Knowledge doesn't come from comfort, it comes from challenge." Robert learned that every skill, no matter how small, could become a building block for future success. Public speaking, writing, managing people, understanding taxes, each skill added a new tool to his toolbox. He began to see that money was simply a byproduct of value, and value was created by skill. The more he learned, the more valuable he became. This chapter also dives into something Rich Dad called asterisk, the power of learning over earning. He believed that if you focus on growing your knowledge, money will naturally follow, but if you chase money without growing your knowledge, you'll always hit a ceiling. He told Robert, people say, "I need more money," but what they really need is more skills. That's why Rich Dad always pushed him to take risks. Don't just learn one trade, learn how to run the whole show. He said that real power in business comes when you understand every part of how money moves, from how to make it, to how to protect it, to how to multiply it. Robert began to understand what his rich dad meant when he said, "Work to learn." Every job, every project, every conversation became a classroom. He realized that while his poor dad spent his life trying to climb the ladder, his rich dad was busy building the ladder. The difference wasn't just money, it was mindset. And that's the real lesson of this chapter. The rich don't see work as a job, they see it as training. They don't ask, "How much will this pay me?" They ask, "What will this teach me?" Because knowledge compounds just like money does. And when you combine experience with curiosity, you become unstoppable. Rich Dad summed it up perfectly when he said, "The moment you stop learning, you start dying." So here's your takeaway from Chapter 6. Stop working only for money. Start working for yourself. Work to learn new skills, to challenge yourself, to grow. Because every skill you master expands your financial freedom. Money will come and go, but what you learn, who you become, and what you can create will stay with you forever. And once you truly understand that, once you start working to learn instead of working to earn, you'll stop chasing money and start attracting it. Because as Rich Dad always said, money follows knowledge. It always has and it always will. Chapter 7. Overcoming Obstacles. Let me ask you something powerful. What's really standing between you and financial freedom? Is it your job, your salary, your background, or is it something invisible, something inside you? Because here's the truth, the biggest obstacles to wealth aren't out there, they're in here. In Chapter 7 of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki shares one of the most eye-opening truths of all, that financial success has less to do with money itself, and everything to do with the way we think and feel about it. Rich Dad told him, The difference between the rich, the poor, and the middle class isn't the size of their paycheck. It's how they handle fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. These 5 emotional obstacles are the real barriers that stop most people from achieving financial freedom. Let's break them down one by one, because understanding them could change your life forever. 1. Fear. Rich Dad said, "Everyone has fear. The difference is how you deal with it." Robert learned that fear, especially the fear of losing money, is what holds most people back from ever becoming rich. He noticed how people say things like, "I don't want to lose everything," or "investing is too risky." But here's the irony. The people who fear losing money the most often end up losing time instead, the one thing they can never get back. Rich Dad explained that the rich lose money too, but they don't let fear stop them. They learn from their losses and keep moving. He said, "Failure inspires winners but defeats losers." Robert realized that his poor dad taught him to avoid risk, while his rich dad taught him to manage it. That one difference in mindset created 2 completely different lives. Because fear never goes away, it just changes shape. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, it's to master it. Rich Dad said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the ability to act despite it." 2. Cynicism. The second obstacle is doubt, or as Rich Dad called it, the voice of cynicism. It's that little voice that says, "That won't work, you'll lose everything, you're not smart enough." And sometimes, that voice doesn't even come from us. It comes from friends, family, or coworkers who project their fears onto us. Poor Dad often told Robert, "Be careful, don't take risks." But Rich Dad said, "The biggest risk is listening to the wrong people." Cynicism kills dreams faster than failure ever could. It makes people analyze so much that they never act. Robert learned that the rich don't ignore reality. They simply focus on finding solutions instead of problems. When someone says, "Real estate is risky," the rich ask, "How can I make it less risky?" When others say, "You can't do that," the rich ask, "How can I?" That simple shift in thinking, from limitation to possibility, is what separates winners from worriers. 3. Laziness. Now, this one's tricky, because most people who are lazy don't look lazy. They're busy all day, running around working long hours, answering emails, but they're not productive. Rich Dad said, "Busy people are often the laziest. They use busyness to avoid what's really important." He explained that real laziness is when you're too busy to think, plan, or learn. Poor Dad would say, "I can't afford that." Rich Dad taught Robert to say, "How can I afford that?" That question forces your brain to get creative. It turns laziness into curiosity, and curiosity into action. Rich Dad said, "A lazy mind says I can't. A smart mind says how can I?" 4. Bad habits. Next comes bad habits, the quiet destroyers of wealth. Rich Dad said, "Our lives are a reflection of our habits. If you have poor spending habits, you'll always be broke, no matter how much you earn." Robert noticed how people would get a raise and immediately upgrade their lifestyle, a bigger car, a nicer phone, more expenses. That's called lifestyle inflation. It keeps people trapped in the rat race. Rich Dad, on the other hand, had a simple rule: pay yourself first. When he said that, Robert's poor dad was shocked. But what if you can't pay your bills? Rich Dad smiled and said, "If you pay yourself first, you'll find a way to pay the bills. If you pay everyone else first, you'll never pay yourself." Paying yourself first doesn't mean ignoring responsibilities. It means prioritizing your future. It forces you to be disciplined, creative, and proactive. Bad habits keep people reactive. Good habits make them intentional. 5. Arrogance. And finally, the 5th obstacle, arrogance. Rich Dad said, "Arrogance is the most expensive disease in the world. It causes people to lose money, opportunities, and growth because they think they already know everything. Robert learned that when people are arrogant, they stop listening, they stop learning, and they stop evolving. The rich stay humble, not out of weakness, but out of awareness. They know there's always something new to learn. Rich Dad told Robert, "The moment you think you're too smart to learn, life will humble you through loss." That's why financial education is never-ending. Even after becoming successful, the rich keep reading, asking questions, and surrounding themselves with experts. Because arrogance closes the mind, and a closed mind can't see opportunity. The core message. As Robert looked back, he realized that all 5 obstacles, fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance, are emotional challenges, not financial ones. They're invisible walls we build in our own minds. Rich Dad told him, "The greatest asset you have is your mind, but it can also be your greatest liability. If you fill your mind with fear, doubt, and excuses, it will protect you from success. But if you train it with courage, curiosity, and learning, it will create endless opportunities." He said, "Most people don't become rich because they never conquer themselves." That was the real lesson. Wealth isn't just built in your bank account, it's built in your mindset. Robert realized that to overcome those obstacles, he had to first change how he thought about money. He had to treat mistakes as lessons, fear as feedback, and failure as fuel. Rich Dad always said, "You're only poor if you give up. The most important thing is to keep going even when you're scared, even when you fail." Because the truth is, success doesn't go to the smartest or the strongest, it goes to the most persistent. And that's the message of this chapter. You can't control the economy, taxes, or the markets, but you can control your emotions. You can control your learning, and that's what makes you unstoppable. So if you ever feel stuck, afraid, or uncertain, remember this: the obstacle isn't the world. The obstacle is your own mind. Face it, train it, and master it. Because once you overcome yourself, no obstacle can stop you. Chapter 8: Getting Started. Let me ask you something. How many times have you told yourself, "One day, I'll start my own business"? Or "Someday, I'll start investing, once I have a little more money"? And then that someday turns into next month, next year, and before you know it, a decade has passed and nothing's changed. That's exactly what this chapter of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is about. Chapter 8, Getting Started, is where Robert Kiyosaki finally gives us the roadmap to take action. Because learning about money is useless if you never use that knowledge to move forward. Rich Dad told Robert something powerful. There are 2 kinds of people in the world: those who dream of success and those who act on it. And this chapter is a blueprint for becoming the second kind. Robert begins by admitting something honest. Most people never get started because they're waiting for the perfect time. They think they need more money, more experience, or more confidence before they can begin. But Rich Dad said, the perfect time never comes. Start small, start scared, but start. He taught Robert that building wealth isn't about finding the right opportunity. It's about becoming the right person to handle opportunity when it comes. And that requires action. Rich Dad shared with Robert 10 powerful steps to get started on the journey to financial freedom. Each one is a mindset shift, not a tactic, because Rich Dad knew that lasting success begins inside. Let's go through them. 1. Find a reason greater than reality. Rich Dad said, without a strong reason, you'll quit when things get hard. You need a purpose bigger than money. Ask yourself, why do you want to be rich? Is it freedom, security for your family, the ability to help others? When your reason is emotional, not logical, it becomes fuel. Because when things get tough, and they will, that why will pull you forward. 2. Choose daily. Every day you have a choice, to grow or to stay the same. Rich Dad said, becoming rich is a decision, one you make again and again. It's not about one big move. It's about small daily choices, reading a little more, learning a new skill, saving instead of spending, asking instead of assuming. Each small choice compounds into massive results over time. 3. Choose your friends carefully. Rich Dad told Robert, if you hang around with people who complain about money, you'll end up broke. If you surround yourself with people who talk about ideas and opportunities, you'll grow. Your environment shapes your expectations. He taught Robert not to envy rich people, but to learn from them. He said, listen to the poor for empathy, but learn from the rich for strategy. The people around you either push you forward or pull you down. Choose wisely. 4. Master a formula, then learn a new one. Most people find one way to make money and stop learning. Rich Dad said, the rich are always learning new formulas. He explained that financial success is like mastering different games: real estate, investing, business, or stocks. The moment you stop learning, the game changes and you get left behind. Keep studying, keep experimenting, keep growing your financial intelligence. 5. Pay yourself first. We heard this earlier, and Rich Dad repeats it here because it's crucial. When you earn money, take a portion and save or invest it before paying anyone else. It's not about greed, it's about discipline. Paying yourself first forces you to manage your money with creativity instead of desperation. As Rich Dad said, if you don't learn to control money, it will control you. 6. Pay your brokers well. This one surprises many people. Rich Dad said, the poor try to save pennies by avoiding experts. The rich spend money to hire the best advisors. He believed that smart people surround themselves with smarter people, accountants, lawyers, mentors, and investors who can guide them. He said, a good broker or advisor can make you more money than they ever cost you. Knowledge is leverage, and when you pay for expertise, you buy speed. 7. Be an Indian giver. This means invest in things that give you something back. Rich Dad taught Robert to always look for returns in money, experience, or education. He said, if you buy something and it doesn't give back, it's not an asset, it's a liability. Every decision should multiply value in some form. 8. Use assets to buy luxuries. Poor people buy luxuries with income. The rich buy luxuries with passive income. Rich Dad explained, don't buy things to look rich. Buy assets that make you rich and let those assets pay for your luxuries. If you want a fancy car, don't use your paycheck. Build an income stream that covers the cost. That's how wealth works quietly, without debt. 9. Choose heroes. Rich Dad said, heroes make learning faster. Study people who have achieved what you want, not to copy them, but to understand their mindset. Whether it's Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, or anyone else, their stories show you what's possible. Heroes compress decades of experience into lessons you can apply in days. 10. Teach and you shall receive. Finally, Rich Dad told Robert, the more you teach, the more you learn. When you share knowledge, it deepens your understanding. Teaching forces you to master what you know and opens new opportunities to connect and grow. That's why the rich give not just money, but information, mentorship, and guidance. Robert realized that all these steps weren't about quick money, they were about transformation. Rich Dad's philosophy was simple. Don't focus on being rich, focus on becoming the kind of person who can handle wealth. Because once you change who you are, money naturally follows. This chapter also reminds us that action beats perfection. Most people read books, watch videos, and feel inspired, but never do anything. They let fear, doubt, or procrastination freeze them. But knowledge without action is useless. Rich Dad told Robert, you don't need to be smart to get rich, you just need to start. He said, winners aren't those who never fail, they're those who never quit. Robert learned that financial freedom isn't about doing something huge. It's about taking one small step every single day in the right direction. And that's what Chapter 8 is really about, starting now. Not tomorrow, not when you have more money or less fear. Now. Because the truth is, you'll never feel fully ready, but if you take the first step, the next one always appears. So ask yourself right now, what's one small action you can take today toward your financial freedom? Read a book, start saving a little. Learn about investing, take a class, talk to a mentor. Whatever it is, do it. Because Rich Dad's final lesson in this chapter is clear. The journey to financial freedom begins with a single choice, the choice to start. And once you start, you'll realize that the hardest part wasn't learning the game of money. It was believing that you could play it. Chapter 9, Still Want More? Here are some to-dos. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you finished a great book or video, felt inspired, and then gone right back to the same routine the next day? You know you want to change your financial life. You know you deserve more, but somehow, life gets in the way. Bills pile up, work gets busy, fear creeps back in. And before you know it, that spark fades. That's exactly why Robert Kiyosaki wrote this final chapter. Still want more? Here are some to-dos. Because inspiration fades, but action, real, consistent action, is what creates results. This chapter is like Rich Dad's final conversation with us, a list of real-world principles to apply everything we've learned. And if you follow even a few of them, your financial life will never be the same again. Robert begins by saying, "There's no magic formula for getting rich, but there are habits that make it almost inevitable." And that's what this chapter gives us, a mindset and a set of daily actions to turn knowledge into wealth. Let's go through them. 1. Stop doing what's not working. Sounds simple, right? But think about it. How many people keep doing the same things year after year and expect different results? Rich Dad told Robert, if what you're doing isn't making you rich, try something else. That's not failure, that's adaptation. The world changes, money changes, and the people who win are the ones who adjust. He said, don't fall in love with your job, your habits, or your comfort zone. Fall in love with progress. So if your current path isn't giving you freedom, stop. Learn something new, pivot, experiment, because the rich are not afraid to change direction. 2. Look for new ideas. Rich Dad believed that wealth begins with curiosity. He said, the more you learn, the more doors open. Robert learned to attend seminars, meet other investors, read new books, study markets, and always ask questions. Rich Dad told him, most people look for reasons why something won't work. The rich look for reasons why it can. Innovation starts with a question, and the best question is, what am I missing? That's how opportunities are born, not from knowing all the answers, but from being willing to explore them. 3. Take action. Rich Dad said, the world is full of smart people who never do anything. They analyze, they plan, they overthink. But action beats knowledge every time. Robert learned that successful people don't wait to feel ready. They act, learn, adjust, and act again. He said, if you want to change your life, move your feet. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing. 4. Find someone who has done what you want to do. Rich Dad told Robert, don't reinvent the wheel. Learn from people who have already done it. Mentorship is a shortcut through decades of trial and error. Robert realized that every successful person he met had mentors, people who guided them, challenged them, and shared their experience. He said, if you can't find a mentor in person, let books, podcasts, and stories become your teachers. Every great achievement begins with guidance and humility to learn. 5. Take classes, read books, attend seminars. Rich Dad believed education doesn't end with school. It begins when school ends. He told Robert, Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. This chapter reminds us to keep feeding our minds. The more you learn about money, business, taxes, and investing, the more confident and capable you become. The rich read constantly because knowledge compounds, just like money. 6. Make lots of offers. This is one of the most practical lessons in the book. Rich Dad said, "You can't win if you don't play." He taught Robert to make offers in real estate, in business, in opportunities, even if they seemed small. Most people hesitate because they fear rejection. But every offer, every deal, every pitch is a chance to learn. Rich Dad said, "You don't need to be perfect, you need to be in motion." The more offers you make, the higher your odds of success. 7. Take baby steps. You don't need to start big, you just need to start. Robert reminds us that most successful people began small, buying one property, starting one side hustle, making one investment. Rich Dad said, "Crawl, walk, then run, but don't just sit there." The goal isn't perfection, the goal is progress. Every small action you take builds confidence, and confidence builds momentum. 8. Focus on learning more than earning. This ties back to Chapter 6, Work to learn, don't work for money. Rich Dad told Robert, "If you focus on learning, money will find you. If you focus only on money, you'll always be chasing it." Learn how businesses grow, how money moves, how taxes work, how assets are built. Each lesson makes you stronger, and soon, your knowledge starts paying you back. 9. Find heroes and imitate them. Rich Dad said, "Success leaves clues." Study your heroes, not just what they do, but how they think. If they built wealth, understand their patterns. If they overcame fear, learn their mindset. Robert looked up to investors, entrepreneurs, and thinkers who turned ideas into income. He realized that modeling success doesn't mean copying. It means learning the principles behind it. 10. Give and you shall receive. This is one of the most powerful lessons in the book, and it's the perfect note to end on. Rich Dad said, "If you want money, give money. If you want respect, give respect. If you want to learn, teach." He believed in the energy of generosity, that the more value you create, the more comes back to you. Robert noticed that the richest people he knew weren't takers, they were givers. They shared knowledge, created jobs, mentored others, and contributed to causes that mattered. And the more they gave, the more abundance flowed their way. Because money, like energy, flows where it's appreciated and multiplied. Robert closes the book with a simple, yet profound truth. You can choose to watch life happen, or you can choose to make it happen. Everything you've learned, from the difference between assets and liabilities, to overcoming fear, to thinking like the rich, leads to one final choice. Will you act? Rich Dad told him, "There are thousands of people who know what to do, but only a handful who actually do it. Be one of the few." So here's your challenge. Don't just finish this story, start your own. Start where you are, with what you have. Read, learn, ask, fail, adjust, and keep going. Because financial freedom isn't something you stumble into, it's something you build, brick by brick, through courage, curiosity, and persistence. And as Rich Dad said, it doesn't matter how much money you make. What matters is how much you keep, how hard it works for you, and how many generations it lasts. So stop waiting, start building. Because one day, someone will read your story and realize that you were the one who decided to stop dreaming about freedom and finally live it. So if this Rich Dad, Poor Dad journey spoke to you, if it opened your eyes to how money really works, then don't let it end here. Because this isn't just a book summary, it's a wake-up call. A reminder that financial freedom isn't for other people, it's for you. Every great change starts with a single decision, and maybe this video was that moment for you. So take that next step. Read, learn, act, and build the life you've always imagined. And hey, if you found value in this, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, because this channel is all about turning knowledge into action. One book, one lesson, one breakthrough at a time. Remember, wealth isn't measured by how much you have, but by how much control you have over your life. So stay hungry, stay curious, and never stop learning, because your journey to financial freedom starts today.